morning, people. Welcome back to F Politics. Whether or not the far right takes over in the UK will be decided based on one single question. Can we successfully call them out? If we manage to do that, they lose, because it's 2024. Even the far right don't want to be called far right. These people are more scared of being called racist than actually being racist. So if we can win the argument that people like Farage are actually far right, then they will lose their power. On the other hand, if we fail to successfully call them out, they will not be stopped. You've heard the phrase, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince the world he didn't exist? Well, the same goes for racism. So I'm going to use an LBC interview that I did just before the election to show you how to deal with people who deny that the Reform Party is racist.
We've seen what's happened across Europe with the rise of the far right, and we're seeing that in the UK with Reform.
You described Reform UK there as far right. Is that, I mean, Stewart, when you heard him do that, did you sort of flinch
I agree with it a bit because, you know, whatever you think of Nigel Farage, it is likely that on Thursday, Reform will poll about 1 in 6 voters, around, maybe even more, maybe nearer 1 in 5. You cannot caricature all those voters, and it might be 4 or 5 million people or around that.
To be fair, Femi wasn't doing that.
No.
I was carrying the party.
But
now, to his credit, and I give this very rarely, Iain Dale at least did call out the straw man. He called out that Conservative lord for trying to imply that I was accusing all Reform voters of being racist. That's a debate for another day.
But you cannot caricature by inference the views of those people as being far right.
That's a weird way of coming back from that, because by inference, you're saying that you can't call the Reform Party far right because people would infer that anybody who voted for them was also far right, but you're the one making that inference. You're the one inferring that.
Now, I don't support Reform and I'm not a member of Reform, but I do think you have to be very careful in the way you describe other people whose views you disagree with.
You'll hear that a lot. Oh, they're just people who have different viewpoints. Yeah, and my viewpoint is that those viewpoints are racist. And you know how he says, I'm not supporting Reform, but we all know what that sounds like. But this is how these traditional conservatives open the door for the actual far right. So here's how you deal with this kind of denial. You get them to draw their own line as to what they think is and isn't far right.
But you are defending them, and so I just want to just ask you if the following, if you would consider that to be far right, or if you consider that to be acceptable within the political discourse. The person who actually founded the Reform Party, Catherine Blakelock, said that black people were inherently violent because of excess testosterone. Their only current MP, Lee Anderson, had to leave the Conservative Party because he said that Sadiq Khan was controlled by Islamists. Nigel Farage used a poster showing Middle Eastern faces to scare people about European migration. When Nigel Farage and Richard Tice were working with Leave.eu during the Brexit years, their communications manager, Andy Wigmore, said that the campaign that they ran together used propaganda that was similar to the Nazis. Do you consider any of this to be far right, or do you consider that to be acceptable?
No, I don't support anything which
do you
is just
to be far right, though.
No, I don't.
No.
No, listen, I don't. Those are examples of a party I don't agree with. I don't support.
But is it far right or not?
What I'm saying is,
you see how he's not actually able to deny that the Reform Party is far right based on the evidence that I provided. We have all the evidence we need to prove that they are far right, whether it's the Channel 4 documentary a few weeks ago, which showed that Reform Party activists calling Rishi Sunak the P word and saying that asylum seekers should be used as target practice, or everything else that I just said. We have all the evidence we need. This should be easy if we just bring the facts to every debate. We've been through 8 years of this crap. The only benefit of that is that we now have all the proof we need. Now, I am sorry. I wish I'd kept pressing him on that and got him to actually say whether or not those things were far right in his view, because that would say a lot more about him. But in those spaces, you have to appear to be as polite as possible, so I eventually let him move on.
But is it far right or not?
What I'm saying is that any discriminatory or insulting or racist or xenophobic language is to be condemned. And, you know, in the same way that there are
the
green...
creator of the party. The creator of the party.
Let me finish.
The leader of the party.
In the same
Their
way,
only MP. These aren't fringe quotes.
In the same way as the Green Party has councillors who are anti-Semitic on the Palestine issue, the Labour Party has kicked out anti-Semites, the Conservative Party. All parties have
their only
MP.
Now, I looked into that, and some of the stuff that those Green candidates were saying definitely crossed the line into anti-Semitic tropes. but the reaction of the Green Party's leadership was to get rid of those people. Now, if you compare that with the Reform Party, Lee Anderson was a Conservative MP. He said Islamophobic stuff about Sadiq Khan, and that was the reason why he then moved to the Reform Party. And at the time, that was the Reform Party's only MP. So the Reform Party deliberately took on people who were deemed to be too bigoted for other parties. Meanwhile, the Green Party, if they find out that a candidate is bigoted, they kick them out. So acting like the two are the same is insane. But then Telegraph journalist Tim Stanley has a pop.
Do I believe that the party is motivated by and exists to be racist? No, I don't believe that. And I'm not sure there's anything in the manifesto that points to that. And
now you can hear me laughing there because his implication is that a party can't be racist unless their manifesto explicitly says we are racist and we're motivated by racism. These people deliberately set the bar for what is racist to be so high that they can get away with anything. But I did get a chance to come back and point out that the "it's just a few bad apples" defense is bull.
alas, there are lots of bad apples in the entire British population. We are a population of bad apples.
I keep using the bad apple defense because it's so many. Like with Nigel Farage, he was on Sky News a few weeks ago, and he said that 46% of British Muslims support Hamas, a terrorist organization, when he was in fact quoting a poll that asked British Muslims to choose between, do you have more sympathy for Hamas or Israel, who have killed like 45,000 people? So he was outright lying about British Muslims to paint them as terrorist supporters. If that's not hate speech from the leader of the party, so forget what's in a manifesto, that's the leader of a party. They don't call it a manifesto because they know that manifestos are lies. So that's who they really are.
But Tim comes back with this ridiculous argument.
But left-wing governments across the world have taken a similar view about their Muslim populations, rightly or wrongly. I don't think rightly. It's not just a right-wing thing.
We need to have a better understanding as to what left and right wing actually are. It is about your attitude to equality. It's about who you think society should be for the benefit of. Because as you're watching this, think about what regimes you would categorize as left or right. If you're thinking on the left, you think socialism, communism, these sorts of things. The idea of everybody sharing equally, trying to benefit as many people as possible. That's the left, in principle, in theory. On the right, what comes to mind? Capitalism, extreme religion, ultra-conservative, that sort of thing. And who does it benefit? It benefits the richest 1%. It benefits the highest social classes, the specific noble families or specific religious sects. So any system that deliberately sets out to push down one specific group, one specific demographic within society to the benefit of another is inherently right-wing. So saying that, yeah, left-wing governments demonize Muslims too, yeah, parties that call themselves left-wing can do right-wing stuff too. You might be surprised to know that the Democratic Republic of North Korea isn't actually that democratic.
I find this idea of using whataboutery, oh, some left-wing governments did this, some other politicians did this. Can we please have standards in politics? This is why people lose faith in politics, because when somebody does something wrong, instead of saying, oh no, that's wrong, if you lie about Muslims and paint them all as terrorists, if you drag journalists out of functions, if you use brown faces to scare people about European migration, then you must be a problem. They just say, oh, well, other countries did this too, or this guy did this too. Can we have some actual values, please?
But the standards are enforced by the ballot box. They're not enforced by you or me. We don't get to say who can and cannot run. And ultimately, if there's a lot more of that behaviour, as I suspect is going to happen, the Reform vote is going to fall a bit. Because I think that message is already getting in that the party is attracting wrong-uns. So ultimately, this needs to be policed by the people through democracy, not through us saying, I don't approve of this person, so they shouldn't be on TV, they shouldn't be able to voice.
No, nobody's banning any, but this is the constant narrative you hear from people complaining about cancel cultures.
Then what do you want?
Nobody's stopping them.
Then what do you want?
This right here is us having a conversation about
the Labour Party?
This right here is us having a conversation about what they are. We should at least be able to say what they are. People going to make up their own minds.
Do you notice how despite defending politicians who are deliberately demonizing Muslims, asylum seekers, ethnic minorities, they still want to paint themselves as the victims, like the left is coming for you, trying to ban you, stop you from standing in elections. And that's because they had no answer to the evidence that I presented them, and so they had to paint themselves as the victim. Let's be clear, the far right should lose in the UK over the next few years because we have all the evidence we need. I have them on record as saying they plan to make us poorer.
We're getting poor for a variety of reasons, of which Brexit is one. Sometimes you have to swallow your medicine to get better in the future. So this is maybe a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan.
So the added paperwork at the border, the massive factories, warehouses that have had to be created to do customs checks and paperwork, that hasn't added any cost to UK trade.
I'm not saying it hasn't added a cost.
So given that the original Brexit policy of the Reform Party Brexit Party was a no-deal Brexit, is that something you'd still pursue now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so even more trade barriers.
Any trade tariffs that are added to our goods leaving, if added on the return, would
increase food prices here.
It would.
How long do you reckon it will take until we actually got self-sufficient, so we wouldn't actually rely on that trade with the EU? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Who knows? I'm not in the farming industry.
Okay, but I mean, there would definitely be a gap between a no-deal Brexit as proposed by the Reform Party and however long it takes for us to get that. So in that time, we'd have made food significantly more expensive before we can actually make our own.
Sometimes you have to take a little pain with some things for it to work.
So the narrative that they're just saying what needs to be said in order to protect working class people, that's dead because they've admitted they plan to hurt working class people. All they are offering is racism, pure and simple. So while I avoided saying in that interview that all Reform Party voters were motivated by racism, one does have to question why you would vote for a party that's on record as saying we will make you poorer for the next 20 years. Because if it's not about improving the lives of the people of the UK, it must be for some other motivation. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.